Do you know the Roman emperor who became so terrifying that his own guards chose to kill him rather than live one more day under his madness? Before we begin, subscribe. It helps us keep history's wildest stories alive. Caligula's story begins long before the crown ever touched his head, in the shadow of an island prison ruled by Emperor Tiberius. As a child, he watched the old emperor torture senators, execute rivals, and poison guests as casually as one breathes. Every scream, every death, every whisper of fear carved itself into the boy's mind. Rome saw a smiling child in a soldier's costume, but inside, something darker was growing. When Tiberius died, Rome erupted in joy as Caligula stepped forward, a young man with charm, energy, and a promise of hope. Crowds cheered his name, senators praised him, and for a moment the empire believed it had found a golden age. He freed prisoners, honored the army, and opened the treasury with generosity that felt almost miraculous. People called him a gift from the gods. They had no idea how quickly the gift would turn into a nightmare. Then came the illness, a sudden, burning fever that nearly killed him. And when he rose from his bed, pale and trembling, something in him had changed. The kindness was gone. The light in his eyes had cooled into something sharp and unpredictable. What happens when absolute power meets a fractured mind? That was when Rome realized he had snapped. Caligula began to see himself not as emperor, but as divine. He walked the marble halls as if he were a living god, demanding temples built in his honor and sacrifices made in his name. He dressed as Apollo, Jupiter, even Venus, stepping into the roles like a performer on a stage only he understood. Senators watched in stunned silence. They couldn't oppose him. To disagree was to die. Torchlight flickered across the palace as Caligula's nights grew stranger. He held feasts that lasted until sunrise, invited nobles only to humiliate them, and emptied Rome's treasury on luxuries no living man needed. He made his horse, Incitatus, a symbol of his contempt, feeding it gold flakes, giving it a marble stable, and hinting he might appoint it consul. Was it a joke or a threat? No one dared ask. And that's when Rome began to fear him. Caligula's cruelty grew sharper with each passing day. He ordered soldiers to attack the sea, commanding them to collect seashells as trophies of victory. He executed people for minor offenses, sometimes for no reason at all. At times he laughed while doing it, as if still that child on Tiberius's island watching suffering as entertainment. He even turned the palace into a maze of terror, hiding behind curtains to startle and strike fear into anyone unlucky enough to cross his path. Rome held its breath. The Senate grew desperate, whispering in corners, sharing glances that carried the weight of death. The Praetorian Guard, once loyal, now watched their emperor with the wary eyes of men standing beside a wild animal. He insulted them, mocked them, threatened them. Even his own family felt the crushing weight of his rage. How long could the empire survive under a ruler who saw human lives as toys? Tension curled through the city like smoke rising from a dying fire. One cold January afternoon, Caligula entered a narrow passage beneath the palace, a place lit only by harsh torchlight and echoing footsteps. He expected applause, obedience, worship. Instead, steel flashed. A group of Praetorian officers, led by Cassius Correa, struck with the silent precision of men who had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in secret. Caligula staggered back, shocked, unable to understand that anyone dared touch a god. But the blades did not stop. That was the moment Rome decided enough was enough. His body fell in a pool of blood that spread across the stone like spilled wine. Within minutes, the young emperor who once controlled the world was gone, killed not by enemies from distant borders, but by the very men sworn to protect him. Outside, the city exhaled, unsure whether to rejoice or tremble at what came next. Power, after all, never dies peacefully in Rome. And when the torches dimmed and the palace returned to silence, the empire was left with the memory of a reign that lasted only 4 years and changed everything. Caligula became a warning etched into history, a reminder of how quickly power can warp the human mind and how fragile sanity becomes when surrounded by absolute authority. His life was short, chaotic, and drenched in fear, but his legacy endures as one of Rome's darkest mirrors. Because in the end, his story is not just about madness. It is about what happens when a child raised in terror grows up holding the world in his hands and decides to break it. If this story pulled you into the shadows of ancient Rome, make sure to like and subscribe. More unbelievable emperors are waiting, and their stories are even darker.